I once spent 3 hours searching for my car keys, tearing apart every drawer, checking coat pockets, and even digging through the trash. All while he watched me, concern on his face, telling me I should really get some help for my forgetfulness. Later that night, I found them in his desk drawer. When I confronted him, he looked at me with such genuine confusion that I apologized to him for accusing him of something I was suddenly certain I must have done myself. The first time I met David, it was like someone had turned up the color saturation on my world. Everything before him seemed dull in comparison. He was attentive in a way no one had ever been, remembering tiny details about stories I'd tell, surprising me with my favorite coffee order, texting me good morning with observations about things I'd mentioned liking. "You're the most self-aware woman I've ever met," he told me one night, 3 months in, as we lay tangled in my sheets. "You know exactly who you are." I didn't know who I was. I was 28, confident in my career as a graphic designer, surrounded by friends I'd had since college, and generally secure in my own skin. I lived alone in a small apartment that I decorated exactly how I wanted it. I was proud of my independence, my reliability, my organized mind. The first incident was so small that I barely registered it. We had plans to meet at a restaurant at 7, but when I showed up, he wasn't there. After 30 minutes of waiting and unanswered texts, I called him. "Hey, where are you?" I asked when he picked up. There was a pause. "What do you mean? We said 8 o'clock. "No, we definitely said 7. I wrote it down. "Babe," he said, his voice gentle with concern. "We texted about it yesterday. You said you had to work late on the Henderson project, so we agreed on 8. Don't you remember?" I pulled up our text conversation right there at the table. But as I scrolled through, I couldn't find any mention of a time change. Still, I found myself second-guessing. Had we talked about it on the phone? Had I been so absorbed in work that I'd forgotten? "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I must have mixed it up." "It's okay," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "You've been working so hard lately. It happens." When I got home that night, I checked my planner again. 7 o'clock was written there in my handwriting. But maybe I'd written it before we changed it. I couldn't be sure anymore. It was just 1 hour after all. Not worth making a big deal about. But then there was the birthday card. I'd bought one for his sister's birthday and left it on the kitchen counter to mail the next day. When I came home from work, it was gone. "Did you see the card I left here?" I asked David, who was cooking dinner. "What card?" he asked, not looking up from the stove. "The birthday card for Ellie. I left it right here to mail tomorrow." He turned to me then, spatula in hand. "You didn't leave any card out, babe." "Yes, I did. It was right here before I left for work." He put down the spatula and came over to me, placing his hands gently on my shoulders. "Rachel, there was no card here when I got home. Are you sure you didn't already mail it? Or maybe you put it somewhere else?" I felt the first flutter of genuine confusion. I was absolutely certain I'd left it there, but David seemed so sure. Had I mailed it automatically on my way to work without remembering? Had I put it somewhere else in a moment of distraction? I spent that evening searching the apartment while David watched me with growing concern. I never found the card. 3 days later, David found it tucked in a book on my shelf. "See," he said, relieved. "You just put it away and forgot." But I never put cards in books. I wouldn't have done that. Still, the evidence was right there in his hands, and I had no explanation. So I thanked him, feeling strangely hollow, and mailed the now late card. These small discrepancies began to multiply. Conversations he claimed we'd had that I couldn't recall. Things I was certain I'd said that he insisted I hadn't. Plans that somehow got mixed up. Items that disappeared and reappeared in places I would never have put them. Each incident was so minor that complaining about it seemed petty. And each time, David was so patient, so understanding of my confusion. He never got angry when I mixed things up or forgot things. He was supportive, concerned. "Maybe you're just stressed," he suggested one night after I couldn't find my favorite necklace, then discovered it in my gym bag, a place I knew I hadn't put it. "You have been working a lot lately." 6 months into our relationship, I started keeping notes in my phone. Not because I suspected anything was wrong with David, but because I was genuinely worried something was wrong with me. I'd never been forgetful before. I'd always trusted my memory, my perception of reality. But lately, I found myself double-checking everything, anxious about what I might have forgotten or misunderstood. "I'm worried about you," David said one night, stroking my hair as I lay with my head in his lap. "You haven't been yourself lately." I looked up at him, at the genuine concern in his eyes, and felt tears well up in my own. "I know," I whispered. "I don't know what's happening to me." "Maybe you should talk to someone," he suggested gently. "A professional." I nodded, grateful for his support, completely unaware that I was falling deeper into a carefully constructed illusion, one designed to make me question the one thing I'd always trusted, my own mind. By our first anniversary, David had moved into my apartment. I'd been hesitant at first. I valued my independence, but he made such a compelling case. It would save us both money. We already spent most nights together anyway. And most convincingly, "I can keep an eye on you, make sure you're okay." Because by then I wasn't okay. The incidents had escalated from minor confusion to genuinely frightening episodes. I would find myself staring at my computer screen at work, unable to remember what project I was supposed to be working on. I'd call clients to follow up on conversations I was certain we'd had, only to discover the call had never taken place. Or worse, that I'd already called them the day before with the same questions. My boss had pulled me aside twice now to ask if everything was all right. I assured her it was just some personal stress, that I'd get it together soon. But privately I was terrified. David suggested I see a therapist, and I agreed. Dr. Marshall was kind and attentive, asking about my childhood, my work, my relationship. When I described my memory issues, she nodded thoughtfully. "Stress can certainly affect cognitive function," she said. "And sometimes anxiety can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. You worry about forgetting things, which makes you more likely to forget." I latched onto this explanation desperately. It made sense. I was just anxious. I could fix this. Dr. Marshall prescribed anti-anxiety medication. David made sure I took it every morning, watching me with those concerned eyes as I swallowed the pill. "I'm proud of you for getting help," he'd say, kissing my forehead. The medication made me foggy, dulling the edges of my anxiety, but also blunting my concentration. Tasks that had once been simple now required intense focus. I found myself relying on David more and more to remember appointments, to remind me of conversations, to keep track of my life. One Friday night, my college friends wanted to meet for drinks. I was excited. I hadn't seen them in months. Between work stress and my episodes, I'd been turning down most social invitations. "You sure you're up for it?" David asked as I got ready. "You seemed pretty wiped this morning." "I'm fine," I insisted, though I had woken up feeling disoriented after a night of strange dreams. The medication did that sometimes. "Okay," he said, hands raised in surrender. "Just looking out for you. Oh, by the way, what time did you tell them? I need to know when to expect you home." 8 o'clock at Riley's, I said, applying mascara. He frowned. "Are you sure it was Riley's? I thought you said it was that new place. What's it called?" "The Foundry." I paused, mascara wand hovering in midair. "No, it's definitely Riley's. Jen suggested it specifically because it's quieter, easier to talk." David shrugged. "If you say so. I just remember you mentioning the Foundry on the phone with someone. But hey, your memory's been better lately." The seed of doubt was planted. By the time I was in the Uber, I was frantically scrolling through text messages, trying to confirm the location. But our conversation had happened in a group chat that I'd apparently been removed from, probably accidentally when someone added a new number. I couldn't see the original message anymore. I told the driver to go to Riley's, but as we approached, anxiety churned in my stomach. What if I was wrong? What if they were all waiting at the Foundry, wondering where I was? I'd look like an idiot. Again. "Actually," I said suddenly, "can you take me to the Foundry instead?" The Foundry was packed, music thumping so loudly I could barely hear myself think. I pushed through the crowd, scanning for familiar faces, finding none. After 15 minutes of searching and unanswered texts, I gave up and redirected to Riley's. By the time I arrived, it was almost 9. My friends were there, on their second round of drinks, looking up with surprise when I rushed in, flustered and apologetic. "Where have you been?" Jen asked. "We were getting worried." "I'm so sorry," I said, sliding into the booth. "I got confused about the location." I thought we said the Foundry. Jen furrowed her brow. The Foundry? That place is so loud. I specifically suggested Riley's because you said you've been having headaches lately. I know. I said, mortification washing over me. I don't know why I got confused. My best friend, Megan, studied me with concern. Are you okay, Ratch? You seem, I don't know, different. I'm fine, I said automatically. Just stressed at work. And I started some new medication that's taking some getting used to. Medication? Megan asked. For what? I hesitated. I hadn't told any of my friends about my episodes, my memory issues. It was embarrassing. And somehow, explaining it felt like admitting there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Just some anxiety stuff, I said vaguely. It's not a big deal. But as the night wore on, I could feel them watching me. I knocked over my water glass, forgot the middle of a story I was telling, and kept checking my phone, partly out of habit, partly because David was texting frequently to check in. How's it going? You doing okay? Remember not to drink with your meds. Text me if you need me to come get you. Each message felt like both a lifeline and a tether. By the time I got home, David was waiting up, reading in bed. He set his book aside as I entered. How was it? He asked. Fine, I said, but my voice caught. He tilted his head. What happened? I went to the wrong place at first, I admitted, tears welling up. I got confused about where we were meeting. David opened his arms, and I collapsed into them, letting him stroke my hair as I cried. It's okay, he soothed. It happens. Not to normal people, I sobbed. Normal people don't forget where they're meeting their best friends. Sure, he whispered. You're just going through a rough patch. The medication will start working better soon. And I'm here for you always. I clung to him, grateful for his unwavering support, even as I spiraled. What I didn't notice was the small, satisfied smile that flickered across his face as he held me, the smile of a man whose plan was working perfectly. A week later, Megan called and asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. Something in her voice made me uneasy, but I agreed. At the cafe, after initial small talk, she reached across the table and took my hand. Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it, okay? I nodded, throat suddenly dry. Are things okay with David? Of course, I said automatically. Why would you ask that? It's just, you've changed since you've been with him. You're more anxious, more, I don't know, uncertain of yourself. The Rachel I know has always been so confident, so sure of herself. I pulled my hand away. I'm going through some stuff. David's been my rock. That's just it, Megan said carefully. It seems like you're leaning on him for everything. Like you don't trust yourself anymore. Because I can't trust myself. I burst out, louder than I intended. Several people glanced our way. I lowered my voice. You don't understand, Meg. I've been forgetting things, important things. I get confused. David's just trying to help me. Megan's eyes were sad. When did this start, Rachel? These episodes. Was it before or after you met David? The question hit me like a slap. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a question. I thought back, trying to remember. Had I been forgetful before David? I didn't think so. But then again, my memory wasn't reliable anymore, was it? I don't know, I said finally. What does it matter? It matters because I care about you, Megan said. And because I've seen this before. My cousin's ex-husband used to. I stood up abruptly. David is not abusive, if that's what you're suggesting. I didn't say abuse, Rachel. You didn't have to. It's what you meant. I grabbed my purse. David loves me. He's the only one who's been there for me through all of this, who hasn't judged me or made me feel worse about myself. Rachel, please. I have to go. I left Megan sitting there, calling after me. When I told David about the conversation later, his face darkened. She's jealous, he said. She's always been a little in love with you, you know. She can't stand to see you happy with someone else. Megan's not in love with me, I protested. She's just worried. Well, she has a strange way of showing it, he said. Attacking your relationship when you're already struggling? That's not what friends do. I didn't respond, but something unpleasant curled in my stomach. Was he right? Was Megan jealous? It didn't seem like her, but then again, I wasn't sure I could trust my own judgment anymore. That night, I lay awake long after David had fallen asleep, replaying Megan's words in my head. When did the episode start? Before or after David? I couldn't remember clearly, but a tiny, persistent voice whispered, after. They started after. But that was ridiculous. What was I suggesting? That David was somehow what? Causing my memory issues? Making me forget things on purpose? Why would anyone do that? I turned over, burying my face in the pillow. No, Megan was wrong. She didn't understand. David was the only one who truly saw me, who accepted me with all my flaws, who was patient with me when I couldn't be patient with myself. Still, I couldn't shake the question that had lodged itself in my mind. When exactly had I started to lose myself? After my confrontation with Megan, things between us grew strained. Our texts became sporadic, then stopped altogether. My other friends reached out less frequently, too. Initially, they'd invite me to everything: brunches, happy hours, weekend trips. But as I continued to decline or cancel at the last minute, the invitations dwindled. "They're just busy," David would say when I mentioned it. "Everyone gets wrapped up in their own lives sometimes." But then he'd add, "Besides, they don't really understand what you're going through." How could they? I couldn't argue with that. None of them knew what it was like to live with this constant fear of my own mind betraying me. What it felt like to be in a meeting and suddenly forget what I was saying mid-sentence. Or to spend 20 minutes searching for my phone while holding it in my hand. Only David understood. Only David had the patience to deal with me. 3 months after the coffee shop incident with Megan, I was let go from my job. My boss was kind about it, framing it as a mutual parting due to my ongoing personal challenges. She even gave me a decent severance package. But we both knew the truth. My work had become unreliable, my mistakes too frequent. I couldn't blame her. David was surprisingly calm when I told him through tears. "Maybe this is a blessing in disguise," he said, holding me on our couch. "You've been so stressed trying to keep up. Now you can focus on getting better." "But what about money?" I asked. "I can't expect you to cover everything." "Let me worry about that," he said soothingly. "My business is doing well. We'll be fine for a while, and when you're ready, you can look for something less demanding. Maybe freelance from home." The relief was immediate and overwhelming. No more pretending I could function normally in an office. No more terror that I'd make a catastrophic mistake that would cost the company a client. No more pitying looks from coworkers. But with that relief came a new reality. I was home. All day. Every day. With nothing but my thoughts and fears for company until David returned from his consulting job. I tried to establish a routine. Morning meditation, as Dr. Marshall had suggested. Healthy meals. Daily walks. But the quiet of the apartment became oppressive. And whenever I ventured out alone, anxiety would grip me. What if I got lost? What if I forgot where I lived? What if I had an episode in public? One afternoon, I decided to surprise David by making his favorite dinner, beef bourguignon with mashed potatoes. It required focus, following a recipe with multiple steps. A test of sorts, to prove to myself that I could still accomplish something meaningful. I was so absorbed in the task that I didn't hear him come home. His voice startled me as I was reducing the sauce. "What are you doing?" I turned, smiling. "Making your favorite." Surprise! Instead of looking pleased, David's brow furrowed. "Babe, we talked about this yesterday. I'm having dinner with a Ferguson client tonight. Remember? I specifically told you not to wait up." My smile faltered. "What? No, you didn't." "Yes, I did." His tone was patient but tinged with disappointment. "We were sitting right here at breakfast. I mentioned the Ferguson deal was closing, and we'd be celebrating tonight." I shook my head. "David, I swear you never said that." I would have remembered. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Rachel, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You forget things and then insist I never told you. It makes me feel like I'm going crazy." "You feel like you're going crazy?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm the one who spent 3 hours cooking a meal we apparently can't even eat." "I wish you would have just texted me to confirm," he said. "You know your memory isn't reliable." I turned back to the stove, gripping the wooden spoon, so hard my knuckles went white. I was absolutely certain he hadn't mentioned any client dinner. I would have written it down. Ever since losing my job, I'd become obsessive about noting everything in my planner. Let me see your phone, I said suddenly. What? He looked genuinely confused. Your phone. If you have dinner plans, they must be in your calendar, right? Something flashed across his face, annoyance? Alarm. But it was gone so quickly I couldn't be sure. I don't need to show you my calendar to prove I'm not lying, he said, his voice taking on a wounded tone. The fact that you'd even ask, that hurts me, Rachel. After everything I've done for you. Shame flooded me immediately. He was right. Here he was, supporting me financially, emotionally, practically, and I was accusing him of lying over a stupid dinner. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't know what's wrong with me. His expression softened. He crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around me. Hey, it's okay. I know this isn't your fault. But babe, that's why you need to trust me. I'm the one with the clear head right now. I nodded against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. I'll do better. I promise. I know you will. He kissed the top of my head. Now why don't you pack some of this up for me to take tomorrow? It smells amazing, and I hate to see your hard work go to waste. That night, alone in our apartment, I pulled out my planner. I flipped to yesterday's page, scanning my notes. Nothing about a client dinner. I checked my phone, scrolling through texts with David from the past few days. Nothing there either. Could I really have forgotten something he told me directly at breakfast? Was my memory that fractured? I got up and paced the living room, trying to recall every detail of yesterday's breakfast. We'd had coffee, toast for me, yogurt for him. What had we talked about? The weather. A movie we wanted to see. Had he mentioned Ferguson? The more I tried to remember, the hazier it became. By the time David came home, late, smelling faintly of wine and wearing a satisfied expression, I had convinced myself that I must have missed it somehow. Maybe I'd been distracted or half asleep. Maybe he had told me, and the information had simply fallen through one of the growing cracks in my memory. The next morning, when I went to pack up the leftovers for David's lunch as promised, I discovered most of the bourguignon was already gone. Only a small portion remained in the pot. Did you eat some of this last night when you got home? I asked as he knotted his tie in the bedroom doorway. He looked at me strangely. No, I had a huge dinner with a client. I was stuffed. Why? Because most of it is gone, I said, confused. There was enough for at least 4 servings, and now there's barely one. He came to the kitchen, peered into the pot, and frowned. That looks like about what was left after you served yourself dinner. I didn't eat any, I insisted. I had a yogurt while I waited for you. David's expression shifted to one of deep concern. Rachel, he said carefully, you texted me at 8:30 saying you were having some of the bourguignon for dinner. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, and then held it out to me. Sure enough, there was a text from my number, having some of the bourguignon now. It turned out really good. Hope your dinner's going well. I stared at the message, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. I had no memory of sending it, no memory of eating the meal I'd prepared. Nothing. My voice faltered. I don't remember doing that. David's concern deepened. You don't remember eating dinner last night? Panic rose in my throat. No, I don't. His arms were around me immediately as my breathing quickened. It's okay. Shoo, it's okay. We'll figure this out. I'll call Dr. Marshall today, see if we can get you in sooner. What's happening to me? I sobbed against his shoulder. Am I losing my mind? No, he said firmly. You're going through something, but we'll get through it. I promise. He called in late to work, sitting with me until I calmed down. Before he left, he put the bourguignon in a container for his lunch, kissed me gently, and made me promise to stay home and rest. As soon as he was gone, I grabbed my phone and frantically checked my text messages. There it was, the message about eating dinner. I had no recollection of typing it. None. With trembling fingers, I opened my recent calls and dialed Dr. Marshall's office. Her receptionist put me on hold, then came back to say the doctor could see me tomorrow morning. I hung up, relief mixing with dread. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Megan. It went to voicemail. This is Megan. Leave a message or text me like a normal person. Her familiar, sarcastic voice brought tears to my eyes. Meg, I said after the beep, my voice breaking. It's Rachel. I know it's been a while and I'm sorry. I need help. Please call me back. I spent the rest of the day in a fog of anxiety, jumping whenever my phone buzzed, hoping it was Megan. But she didn't call back. That evening, David returned home with takeout and a new prescription from Dr. Marshall. I spoke with her, he explained, setting the pill bottle on the counter. Told her what happened. She called in something stronger for your anxiety. She thinks the stress might be causing these memory blackouts. I stared at the bottle. You talked to my doctor without me? I was worried about you, he said, looking hurt. I thought you'd be grateful. I am. I backpedaled quickly, not wanting to seem ungrateful after everything he'd done. It's just unusual for doctors to prescribe medication without seeing the patient. Dr. Marshall has known you for over a year, he reasoned. And I explained it was an emergency. That's why she agreed to see you tomorrow, too. It made sense when he put it that way. I was being paranoid. Again. Thank you, I said, forcing a smile. I don't know what I'd do without you. He beamed, pulling out containers of Thai food. That's what partners are for. Now, let's eat before it gets cold. And don't forget to take your new pill. I took the medication with dinner, and within an hour, a pleasant heaviness settled over me. The sharp edges of my anxiety dulled. By the time David led me to bed, I was docile, pliant, my earlier panic a distant concern. As I drifted off to sleep, one last thought surfaced through the pharmaceutical haze. I still didn't remember eating that bourguignon. And there was no food-stained dish in the sink that morning. None at all. But before I could grasp the significance of this realization, darkness claimed me, and I slipped away into dreamless sleep. My appointment with Dr. Marshall the next morning left me more confused than ever. David insisted on coming with me, something he'd never done before. I'm just worried about you driving in your condition, he explained. And I want to make sure Dr. Marshall understands everything that's been happening. I was too worn down to argue. When we arrived, David asked if he could join us for the session. Dr. Marshall looked at me questioningly. Is that what you want, Rachel? I felt David's hand squeeze mine. There was an expectation in that squeeze. Yes, I said quietly. He's been witnessing everything. It might help. The session was surreal. David did most of the talking, describing incidents I barely remembered or remembered differently. The dinner confusion. The text message I didn't recall sending. Other episodes I wasn't even aware had happened. She woke up in the middle of the night last week, convinced someone was in the apartment, he told Dr. Marshall. I had to calm her down for nearly an hour. I frowned, trying to recall this. There was a vague memory of feeling frightened in the dark, but the details were hazy. And sometimes she becomes, I don't want to say hostile, but agitated, David continued, accusing me of moving her things or lying about conversations we've had. Dr. Marshall nodded, making notes. And these new medications I prescribed yesterday, have you started those, Rachel? Yes, She took the first dose last night, David interrupted. She slept well, but she's still a bit groggy this morning. That's to be expected, Dr. Marshall said. The drowsiness should subside as your body adjusts. I tried to focus on her words, but they seemed to come from far away. The office was too warm, the lights too bright. David and Dr. Marshall continued talking, their voices blending together as I struggled to keep my eyes open. Might consider a short voluntary stay at Westlake. Worried about her being alone. Assessment might give us more insight. I snapped back to attention at the word Westlake. Westlake was a psychiatric facility. Were they talking about sending me there? I don't need to be hospitalized, I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. They both turned to me, seemingly surprised that I was still present. It's just an option to consider, Dr. Marshall said gently. A comprehensive evaluation might help us pinpoint what's happening. David's helping me, I insisted. I'm getting better. David squeezed my hand again. Of course you are, babe. We're just exploring all options. By the time we left Dr. Marshall's office, I had a new prescription for an even stronger anti-anxiety medication and a referral for neuropsychological testing. David drove us to the pharmacy immediately. I still don't understand why she thinks I need such strong medication, I said as we waited for the prescription to be filled. I'm just having some memory issues, not a complete breakdown. David gave me a sad look. Rachel, You're not seeing the full picture. These aren't just memory issues. You're having significant episodes that you don't even remember afterward. Dr. Marshall is concerned, and frankly, so am I. I stared out the car window, watching people go about their normal lives. What I wouldn't give to be one of them right now. Someone whose mind wasn't betraying them, who didn't need to be monitored and medicated. Do you really think I need to go to Westlake? I asked quietly. Let's try the new medication first, he said. But if things don't improve, we might need to consider it. I just want you to get the help you need. The new pills made the old ones seem like candy. Within an hour of taking the first dose, I could barely form coherent thoughts. Time stretched and compressed in strange ways. I'd blink and suddenly 2 hours had passed. I try to read a paragraph and forget the beginning by the time I reached the end. David managed everything now, my medication schedule, my doctor appointments, my meals. He worked from home most days to keep an eye on me. When he did go to the office, he called repeatedly to check in, his concern never wavering. One afternoon, about a week after starting the new medication, I was lying on the couch in a half-conscious state when my phone buzzed. It took me 3 attempts to pick it up from the coffee table. A text from an unsaved number. Rachel, it's Megan. I just got your voicemail. I was out of the country for work. Are you okay? I've been worried about you. I stared at the message, a small flame of hope flickering to life. Megan had called back. She was worried about me. With fumbling fingers, I typed a response. Not okay. Something wrong. Can't think straight. Need help. I sent it before I could reconsider. Almost immediately, 3 dots appeared, indicating she was typing. Where are you? At your apartment. Is David there? Home. Alone. David at work. New meds. Can barely stay awake. I'm coming over. Give me 30 minutes. I let the phone drop onto my chest, relief washing over me. Megan was coming. Megan would help me figure this out. But a new anxiety quickly followed. David checked in regularly. What if he called while Megan was here? What if he came home early? I forced myself to sit up, fighting against the medication's pull. I needed to be more alert when Megan arrived. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. I barely recognized myself. My face was gaunt, dark circles under my eyes despite sleeping 12+ hours a day. My hair was limp and unwashed. But worst of all was the emptiness in my eyes, the dull, vacant look of someone who had retreated deep inside herself. What's happening to you? I whispered to my reflection. The doorbell rang, startling me. I made my way carefully to the door, grasping furniture for support as I went. When I opened it, Megan gasped. Oh my God, Rachel, she breathed, stepping inside and shutting the door behind her. What's happened to you? I don't know, I said, and the tears came suddenly, violently. I don't know what's real anymore. Megan led me to the couch, her arm around my shoulders. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Through the fog of medication, I tried to explain. The memory lapses, the incidents that David described that I couldn't recall, the increasing isolation, the job loss, the new prescriptions that left me zombie-like. Megan listened intently, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. Rachel, she said when I finally fell silent, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it. Is there any possibility, any at all, that David might be doing this to you? Doing what? I asked, genuinely confused. Making you think you're losing your mind. Manipulating your reality. I shook my head. Why would he do that? He loves me. He's taken care of me through all of this. Has he? Or has he been controlling you? Isolating you from friends, from work, making you dependent on him? I started to object, but the words caught in my throat. A series of memories flashed through my mind. David finding items I knew I hadn't misplaced, conversations he claimed we'd had that I couldn't recall, him speaking to doctors on my behalf, the ever-increasing medications. I don't know, I whispered. I can't trust my own mind. That's just it, Megan said urgently. I think your mind is fine. I think he's been gaslighting you. Gaslighting. The term sounded vaguely familiar, but my drugged brain couldn't place it. It's a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you question your own reality, your memory, your perceptions. until you can't trust yourself anymore and become completely dependent on them. I shook my head. No, David wouldn't do that. Rachel, think about it. When did these episodes start? After you met him, right? And they've gotten worse as your relationship progressed, as he's gained more control over your life. But I've seen doctors. They've prescribed medication. Based on what? Your symptoms. Or what David has told them about your symptoms. I couldn't answer. The room seemed to tilt around me. Look, Megan said, pulling out her phone. There's a term for this. Let me show you. She typed quickly, then handed me the phone. On the screen was an article titled Gaslighting, a form of emotional abuse. I read through it, each bullet point hitting me like a physical blow, making you question your memory of events, denying things you know they said or did, calling you crazy or too sensitive, isolating you from friends and family, turning others against you by portraying you as unstable, making you dependent on them. My hands began to shake. This can't be right. Rachel, look at yourself, Megan said gently. 6 months ago, you were independent, successful, confident. Now you can barely get off the couch. You've lost your job, your friends, your sense of self. And through it all, who's been the constant? Who's been helping you in ways that only make you more dependent? I couldn't speak. The possibility was too horrifying to consider. Yet something deep inside me recognized the truth in her words. You don't have to decide anything right now, Megan said. But I want you to come stay with me for a few days. Just to get some distance, clear your head. See if things start to make more sense when you're away from him. I can't just leave, I said, panic rising. He'll be worried. And my medication. I'll help you pack your medication, she said firmly. And you can text him that you're staying with me for a few days. That you needed some girl time. The thought of leaving was terrifying. David had become my anchor in a world where nothing else seemed solid. But a tiny voice inside, the last remnant of the confident woman I used to be, whispered, go with her. This might be your only chance. Okay, I said, the word barely audible. I'll come with you. Megan helped me pack a small bag. Clothes, toiletries, medications. My movements were slow, clumsy, but determination pushed me forward. As we headed for the door, it suddenly swung open. David stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to anger to concern, so quickly I might have imagined the intermediate emotions. Megan, he said coolly, this is unexpected. David, she replied, equally cool. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check on Rachel. She's not doing well. I'm aware of that, he said. That's why I came home early. To take care of her. He looked at the bag in my hand. Going somewhere. I froze, words dying in my throat. Megan stepped forward. Rachel's coming to stay with me for a few days. She needs some time away. David's laugh was incredulous. That's ridiculous. She's on heavy medication. She needs supervision. I'll supervise her, Megan said. I'm her friend. You're her friend who disappeared for months, David countered. I'm her partner. I've been here every day, dealing with her episodes, her confusion, her paranoia. I didn't disappear, Megan shot back. I was pushed away. By you. David turned to me, his voice softening. Rachel, honey, you can barely stand right now. You're in no condition to go anywhere. Let me help you back to bed. He reached for me, but Megan stepped between us. She's coming with me, David. His expression hardened. I don't think you understand the situation, Megan. Rachel is very unwell. Mentally unwell. She needs professional help, not a sleepover. That's exactly what I think she needs, Megan said. Time away from your help. They were talking about me as if I wasn't there, as if I couldn't make my own decisions. Something inside me snapped. Stop it, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. Both of you. They turned to me, surprised. I'm going with Megan, I said to David. Just for a few days. His face darkened. Rachel, you're not thinking clearly. The medication is making it hard to think at all, I finished. I need space to figure things out. Figure what out? He demanded. What has she been telling you? He glared at Megan. Have you been filling her head with nonsense? Turning her against me? She hasn't turned me against you, I said. She's just raised some questions. Questions. He laughed bitterly. Let me guess. She thinks I'm what? Abusing you? Controlling you? When all I've done is support you through the worst time of your life. The familiar guilt rose within me, but Megan placed a steadying hand on my arm. Rachel, we should go, she said quietly. David's voice turned pleading. Babe, please. You know I only want what's best for you. If you leave now in this state, I'm afraid of what might happen. I hesitated, torn. What if he was right? What if I was making a terrible mistake? Rachel, Megan said firmly, remember what we discussed. Trust yourself. Trust myself. The concept seemed foreign after months of being told I couldn't. I took a deep breath. I'm going, David. I'll call you tomorrow. His expression hardened, the mask of concern slipping for just a moment to reveal something cold beneath. Fine. Go. But don't come crawling back when you have one of your episodes and Megan doesn't know how to handle it. Megan took my bag and my arm, guiding me past David to the door. As we stepped into the hallway, he called after us. She'll need her evening medication at 6 and her sleeping pill at 9. Don't forget. The elevator doors closed on his concerned face, and I sagged against the wall, exhausted by the confrontation. You did good, Megan said, squeezing my hand. Really good. But as we drove away from the apartment, away from the only certainty I'd known for months, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was either making the bravest decision of my life or the biggest mistake. Little did I know, it was the first step on a long journey back to myself. The first night at Megan's apartment was hell. My body screamed for the evening dose of medication I'd left behind in our hasty exit. I shook, sweated, and eventually vomited. Megan sat with me on her bathroom floor, holding back my hair, pressing a cool washcloth to my forehead. Should we go to the hospital? She asked, concern etched on her face. No, I managed between waves of nausea. No hospitals. David would find me. But if you're having withdrawal symptoms, I just need to get through tonight, I insisted. Please, Meg. She reluctantly agreed, making me promise to reconsider if things got worse. Somehow, I survived the night, drifting in and out of consciousness on her bathroom floor. By morning, the worst had passed, though I felt hollowed out, fragile. Megan called in sick to work and made me dry toast and tea. Small bites, she instructed, sitting across from me at her tiny kitchen table. We need to get something in your stomach. I managed a few nibbles, my hand still trembling slightly. The fog that had enveloped my mind for months was beginning to lift, leaving raw clarity in its wake. How long have I been on those medications? I asked. Megan shook her head. I don't know exactly. From what you've told me, it's been escalating for months. My phone had been buzzing consistently since we arrived at her apartment. David calling, texting, alternating between concern and anger. Rachel, please call me. I'm worried sick. I don't know what Megan's told you, but you're not thinking clearly. If you don't come home, I'm calling the police to report you missing. I'm only trying to help you. Why can't you see that? I turned the phone off after reading the last message, unable to bear his pleas and threats. He's going to come looking for me, I said. Let him, Megan replied with unexpected fierceness. This is my home. He can't force you to leave. The next 3 days passed in a blur of physical and emotional detox. As the medications cleared from my system, my thinking sharpened. I slept in fits and starts, plagued by nightmares but also by increasing moments of clarity. On the 4th morning, I woke before Megan and made coffee, standing at her kitchen window watching the city come to life below. For the first time in months, I felt present, connected, real. When Megan emerged from her bedroom, she stopped in surprise. You're up, she said, taking in the sight of me fully dressed, coffee in hand. And you made coffee. I did, I replied, offering her a mug. I feel better. Clearer. She accepted the coffee with a smile. You look better. More like yourself. We sat at her small dining table, the morning sun streaming through the windows. I traced the grain of the wooden tabletop with my fingertip, organizing my thoughts. I want to understand what happened to me, I said finally. All of it. Megan nodded. I think that's a good idea. Where do you want to start? The beginning. When did you first notice something was wrong? She considered this carefully. About 4 months into your relationship with David. We were supposed to meet for our monthly book club, just the two of us, and you canceled last minute. Said David wasn't feeling well, and you needed to take care of him. I don't remember that, I admitted. It wasn't just that you canceled. It was how you sounded on the phone, apologetic, nervous, like you were afraid of disappointing me. That wasn't like you. She took a sip of coffee. After that, you started canceling more often. When we did see each other, you'd check your phone constantly, always anxious about getting home on time. You started to seem smaller somehow. I absorbed this, trying to reconcile it with my fractured memories of that time. What else? The dinner party at Kim and Jason's. About 6 months in, David kept correcting your stories, saying you were misremembering details. It was subtle at first, a date here, a name there. But by the end of the night, he was essentially retelling your own anecdotes for you. When I asked you about it later, you brushed it off, said you'd been stressed and your memory wasn't great. A vague recollection surfaced, David's hand on my knee under the table, squeezing slightly each time I misspoke. Then there was your birthday last year, Megan continued. We had always gone out for breakfast, just us, since college. But you texted the night before saying you couldn't make it. When I called, David answered your phone, said you were in the shower. He told me you'd been having episodes, and weren't up for socializing. When you finally called back hours later, you sounded off. Drugged, almost. The first prescription, I murmured, remembering the initial visit to Dr. Marshall. For anxiety. After that, it became nearly impossible to see you alone. David was always there, or you were too unwell to meet. The few times I did see you, you were different, uncertain, constantly second-guessing yourself, checking with David before answering even basic questions. Megan reached across the table to take my hand. I tried to talk to you about it a few times, but you shut down. Said I didn't understand how supportive he was, how much he'd done for you. I remember the coffee shop, I said. When you asked if things were okay with David, I got so defensive. You stormed out, she confirmed. After that, my calls went straight to voicemail. My texts were answered hours or days later, always with an excuse for why you couldn't talk or meet up. Then I got sent to Hong Kong for a work project. I was gone for 3 weeks. When I got back and checked my voicemail, I was asking for help. I finished. You sounded terrified, she said. I came as soon as I could. I sat with this information, pieces of the past year slowly clicking into place. Not as I'd experienced it, a descent into mental instability, but as it may have actually been, a calculated campaign to destroy my trust in myself. I need to see a doctor, I said suddenly. A different doctor. I need to know what medications I've been taking, what their effects are. And I need to know if I ever actually had any real symptoms before I started taking them. I've already made you an appointment, Megan said, for tomorrow morning. With my doctor, Dr. Chen. I told her it was urgent. Relief flooded me. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet, she said grimly. We still have to deal with David. He's been calling my work, my mother, mutual friends, anyone who might know where you are. He's telling everyone you're having a psychiatric emergency, that you're a danger to yourself. My stomach nodded. What do we do? For now, we keep you safe and get you medical attention. Then we figure out the next steps. She paused. Rachel, have you considered that you might need to officially end things with him? Get a restraining order, maybe? The thought sent a wave of anxiety through me. End things with David? Despite everything, the idea felt impossible. He had been the center of my universe for so long. My caretaker. My reality check. My everything. But that was exactly the problem, wasn't it? One step at a time, I said. Doctor first. Dr. Chen was everything Dr. Marshall wasn't, direct, attentive to what I was saying rather than what was in my file, and suspicious of the medication regimen I'd been prescribed. These dosages are concerning, she said, frowning at the pill bottles Megan had grabbed from my bag. Particularly in combination. Who prescribed these? I explained about Dr. Marshall, about David's involvement in my care. Dr. Chen's frown deepened. I'd like to run some blood tests, see exactly what's in your system. And if you're comfortable, I think we should call Dr. Marshall's office while you're here, request your complete medical records. The call was revelatory. According to Dr. Marshall's records, I had reported symptoms I had no memory of experiencing, paranoid delusions, auditory hallucinations, violent outbursts. The notes referenced multiple incidents that David had apparently reported between sessions. "I never experienced any of that," I said, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Never." "Let's be thorough," Dr. Chin said calmly. "I'd like you to see a neurologist as well, just to rule out any actual neurological issues. But I have to tell you, Rachel, from what you've described and what I'm seeing in these records, my concern is not that you have a psychiatric condition. My concern is that you've been deliberately drugged and manipulated." The blood tests confirmed her suspicion. The levels of medication in my system were considerably higher than what the prescription bottles indicated, suggesting either that the dosages had been increased without my knowledge or that additional drugs had been mixed in. "This is criminal," Dr. Chin said, no longer hiding her anger. "If someone has been tampering with your medication, that's assault." The neurological exam showed no abnormalities, no reason for memory loss, confusion, or any of the other symptoms I had been experiencing. "What happens now?" I asked Dr. Chin at our follow-up appointment a week later. "That depends on what you want," she said. "Medically, my recommendation is to continue your detox under supervision, with support for any withdrawal symptoms. Beyond that," she hesitated. "Rachel, if what you're describing is accurate, and all the evidence suggests it is, then this is a matter for the police." The word hung in the air between us. Police. Making this official. Going from victim to accuser. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course," Dr. Chin replied. "But please, whatever you decide about pressing charges, do not return to that relationship. The level of manipulation you've described, it rarely de-escalates on its own." Back at Megan's apartment, I stood at the same window where I'd experienced my first moment of clarity a week earlier. The city sprawled before me, full of people living their lives, making choices, trusting their own perception of reality. "What are you thinking?" Megan asked, joining me at the window. "I'm thinking about what's real," I said. For so long, reality was whatever David told me it was. I couldn't trust my own eyes, my own memory. And now I'm angry, I said, surprised by the heat in my voice. I'm angry that he stole a year of my life, that he made me believe I was crazy, that he isolated me from everyone who cared about me. "Good," Megan said firmly. "Anger is appropriate here. Anger can fuel what comes next." "Which is what?" "Reclaiming your life." That night, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I wrote in my journal. Not the careful, paranoid notes I had been keeping to track my episodes, but real, raw, unfiltered thoughts. I wrote about the relationship from beginning to end, tracing the subtle ways David had undermined my reality. I wrote about the medications, the isolation, the fear. And finally, I wrote about the future, uncertain but my own. In the morning, I made a decision. I called Dr. Chen and asked her to document everything, the blood tests, the neurological results, the discrepancies in my medical records. Then I called a lawyer Megan had recommended, specializing in domestic abuse cases. "It won't be easy," the lawyer, Miranda Okafor, warned me during our consultation. "Psychological abuse is harder to prove than physical abuse. But the medication tampering, if we can prove that, is concrete. And your medical records, the documented escalation, the isolation from friends and family, it builds a compelling case." "For what?" I asked. "What am I even seeking here?" "Protection, first and foremost," she said. "A restraining order to keep him away from you. Beyond that, there could be criminal charges for the medication tampering. And potentially a civil suit for damages, medical expenses, lost wages, emotional distress." It sounded exhausting. A public dissection of the most humiliating period of my life. But the alternative, letting David continue his life unscathed, perhaps finding another victim, was unthinkable. "I want to proceed," I said. "All of it." Miranda nodded approvingly. "It won't be quick, and it won't be easy. But reclaiming your narrative, your truth, that's the first step in healing." As I left her office, my phone, which I'd finally turned back on, pinged with a new message. From David. "I know you're staying with Megan. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Please, Rachel. I'm worried sick. If you're angry with me, we can talk about it. But this disappearing act isn't fair. I love you. I miss you. Come home. For a moment, the old doubt crept in. Was I overreacting? Misinterpreting? Making a terrible mistake? Then I remembered Dr. Chen's words. Trust yourself. And I did. For the first time in a very long time, I trusted my own perception, my own memory, my own instincts. I deleted the message without responding and walked into the bright afternoon sun, stepping firmly onto the path that led back to myself. The temporary restraining order was granted 3 days after my meeting with Miranda. The judge, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes, listened carefully to my testimony, reviewed Dr. Chen's medical documentation, and examined the text messages David had sent since I'd left, messages that had escalated from concern to anger to thinly veiled threats. Ms. Bennett, she said after deliberating, I find sufficient evidence to issue a temporary restraining order prohibiting David Mercer from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of your person, residence, or workplace for a period of 30 days, pending a full hearing. Relief washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without looking over my shoulder, expecting to see David there. But the restraining order, while necessary, was just the beginning. There was still the matter of rebuilding my life from scratch. I had no job, no apartment of my own, David was still living in mine, and barely enough savings to cover a few months' expenses. The professional reputation I'd spent years building had been damaged by my unexplained absence and abrupt termination. Stay with me as long as you need, Megan insisted when I brought up finding my own place. We'll figure out the rest together. Together. A concept that had once been central to my life before David had systematically isolated me. Now, slowly, my support network was reforming. Megan had reached out to our old friends, explaining in broad strokes what had happened. Kim and Jason, who'd hosted that fateful dinner party where David had first publicly corrected my memories, came by with home-cooked meals and tearful apologies for not seeing what was happening. We thought you were just going through something, Kim admitted, hugging me tightly. We should have asked more questions. You couldn't have known, I assured her, though part of me wished someone, anyone, had recognized the signs sooner. My parents flew in from Arizona, their faces drawn with worry and guilt. They'd spoken to David several times over the past year, accepting his explanations for why I couldn't come to the phone or why our planned visits had to be canceled. He told them I was fragile, that disruptions to my routine could trigger episodes. We thought we were helping by giving you space, my father said, his voice breaking. If we had known. It's not your fault, I told them, the words becoming a mantra I repeated to everyone who expressed regret. He was very convincing. 2 weeks after leaving David, I received a certified letter from him. Miranda had advised me to open it with her present, so I brought it to our next meeting. This is common, she explained as I hesitantly broke the seal. When direct communication is blocked by a restraining order, abusers often turn to official channels to maintain contact. The letter inside was typed on formal stationery, nothing like David's usual warm, handwritten notes. Rachel, I am writing to express my profound concern for your well-being and my hurt at the actions you have taken against me. The restraining order was unnecessary and based on falsehoods. I have only ever acted out of love and concern for your health. Your sudden departure, influenced by Megan's misguided interference, has left me deeply worried. You were not in a state to make such decisions. The medications you so abruptly stopped are necessary for your condition, a condition that several medical professionals have documented. I have gathered all relevant medical records and have consulted with attorneys of my own. Should you continue with these defamatory allegations, I will have no choice but to present evidence of your psychiatric condition to the court. That said, I harbor no ill will. I understand that you are unwell and acting under the influence of others. I am willing to forgive this episode and welcome you home, where I can continue to provide the care you need. I remain, as always, devoted to your well-being, David. My hand shook as I set down the letter. It was so perfectly, insidiously David. The concern, the subtle threat, the positioning of himself as the reasonable caretaker against my irrational actions. He's threatening to use my psychiatric condition against me, I said, fighting back tears of anger. Miranda's expression hardened. This letter is actually helpful for our case. It demonstrates his continued attempt to control the narrative and intimidate you. Will it work? Legally, I mean. Can he use my medical records against me? He can try, she acknowledged. But remember, we have Dr. Chen's assessment, the blood tests showing medication levels inconsistent with your prescriptions, and the neurological exam showing no underlying condition. If anything, your medical records may end up being evidence against him, showing how your symptoms appeared and escalated in correlation with his increasing control. She was right, but the letter had achieved its purpose. It had shaken my newfound confidence, planted seeds of doubt. What if there was some evidence I didn't know about? What if some of my symptoms had been real? Rachel, Miranda said gently, noticing my distress, this reaction, this doubt, is exactly what he wants. It's how he controlled you for so long. Don't let him back into your head. That evening, I talked through my fears with Megan and my parents. Then I did something I should have done months ago. I started researching gaslighting, emotional abuse, and coercive control in earnest. I read survivor stories, psychological studies, and legal cases. Knowledge became my armor against David's manipulation. I also began looking for work. My portfolio was still strong, even if my recent employment history had a troubled ending. With Megan's encouragement, I reached out to former colleagues and clients, carefully explaining that I'd been dealing with health issues that were now resolved. To my surprise and relief, people were more understanding than I had feared. A former client offered me freelance work designing their annual report, and a small design studio agreed to bring me on for a 3-month contract position. We've all been through rough patches, the studio's creative director said during our interview. What matters is the quality of your work, and that's never been in question. With income on the horizon, I began apartment hunting, focusing on buildings with security features and locations far from my old neighborhood. The thought of running into David randomly on the street still filled me with cold dread. The full restraining order hearing was scheduled for exactly 1 month after the temporary order was granted. I prepared obsessively with Miranda, reviewing my testimony, gathering evidence, steeling myself for the possibility of seeing David face to face for the first time since I'd left. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. What if the judge didn't believe me? What if David's charm was more convincing than my truth? What if I fell apart on the stand, confirming his narrative that I was unstable? My mother sat with me in the kitchen at 3 a.m., making chamomile tea as I voiced my fears. "Rachel," she said, her voice steady, "I've known you your entire life. You are not the person David tried to make you believe you were. You're strong, smart, and sane. The judge will see that." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, wood-paneled and formal. I sat beside Miranda at one table, while David and his attorney, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit, sat at another. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look at him, though I could feel his gaze boring into me. The hearing proceeded methodically. Miranda presented our evidence, my medical records before and after leaving David, showing the dramatic change once I was no longer under his influence. Testimony from Dr. Chen about the excessive medication levels in my system, statements from friends about the observable changes in my behavior and David's controlling actions, and the certified letter, which the judge read with a furrowed brow. Then it was David's turn. His attorney painted a picture of him as the devoted boyfriend, desperately trying to help his mentally ill partner. She submitted statements from Dr. Marshall confirming my condition and treatment. She showed text messages I'd sent during my episodes, messages I had no memory of writing, or that had been taken out of context. Finally, David himself took the stand. I forced myself to look at him then, and was startled by what I saw. He appeared haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a slight tremor in his hands. But his voice was as smooth and reasonable as ever. "I only wanted to help Rachel," he said, his eyes sad and sincere. She began experiencing memory lapses, confusion, anxiety. I encouraged her to see a doctor. I supported her through her treatment. I rearranged my entire life to care for her. His attorney guided him through a recounting of our relationship that was both familiar and alien, events I recognized but with motivations and context twisted to serve his narrative. "And why do you think Miss Bennett has filed this restraining order?" his attorney asked. David sighed heavily. Rachel's condition includes paranoid thoughts. When she abruptly stopped taking her medication, against medical advice, these thoughts intensified. She began to believe I was somehow causing her symptoms. He looked directly at me then, his eyes brimming with what appeared to be genuine hurt. I still care about her deeply. I still want to help her. But I can't help someone who refuses to acknowledge they need help. It was a masterful performance. I could see its effect on the courtroom, the sympathetic glances, the slight shifts in posture. Even knowing what I knew, I felt the pull of his reality-bending gravity. During cross-examination, Miranda was methodical, picking apart his testimony point by point. She pressed him on the inconsistencies in his timeline. She questioned him about my alleged episodes that conveniently had no witnesses besides him. She confronted him with evidence of his efforts to isolate me from friends and family. "Mr. Mercer," she said finally, "did you ever tamper with Miss Bennett's medication? Add to it, substitute it, or otherwise manipulate the doses she was taking?" "Absolutely not," he said, looking appalled. "That's a serious accusation. Then how do you explain the blood test results showing levels of sedatives not prescribed by Dr. Marshall?" "I can't explain that," he said, his composure slipping slightly. Perhaps she was self-medicating, with prescription drugs she didn't have access to? A flash of anger crossed his face. So quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't become an expert at reading his micro-expressions. "I don't know. I'm not responsible for her actions when I wasn't present." The exchange continued, with Miranda poking holes in his story while he maintained his concerned, bewildered facade. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on the judge, speaking as clearly and calmly as I could about my experience. I described the subtle way the gaslighting had begun, the escalation as David gained more control, and my gradual loss of trust in my own perceptions. "I'm not mentally ill," I stated firmly. "I was systematically manipulated by someone who wanted control over me. The symptoms I experienced were either induced by excessive medication or were normal reactions to being continually told I couldn't trust my own mind." David's attorney attempted to undermine my testimony, suggesting I was in denial about my condition, that I'd fabricated the abuse narrative to avoid facing my mental health issues. But with each question, I felt stronger, more certain of my truth. By the time the hearing concluded, I was exhausted but oddly calm. I had spoken my truth. Whether the judge believed me or not, I knew who I was again. We had to wait 3 days for the judge's decision. They were 3 of the longest days of my life. I threw myself into work, into apartment hunting, into anything that would keep my mind occupied. On the 3rd day, Miranda called. "The permanent restraining order has been granted," she said, her voice triumphant. "For 1 year, with the option to renew. And Rachel," the judge referred the case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to the medication tampering. I sank onto Megan's couch, tears flowing freely. It wasn't over. The criminal investigation would mean more statements, more evidence, more confrontations, but it was validation. Someone in authority had heard my story and believed me. That night, my parents, Megan, and a few close friends gathered for a small celebration. As I looked around at their faces, supportive, loving, proud, I realized something profound. This was reality. These connections, these moments of authentic human interaction, unclouded by manipulation or doubt, this was what David had tried to take from me. "I'd like to make a toast," my father said, raising his glass. "To Rachel, to her courage, her strength, and her return to herself." "To Rachel," they echoed, glasses raised. "To myself," I thought, raising my own glass. To reclaiming my reality, one truth at a time. 1 year after leaving David, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, morning sunlight streaming through the windows as I prepared for a day I'd been both anticipating and dreading. The criminal case against David was finally going to trial. The district attorney had charged him with assault, unlawful administration of controlled substances, and domestic abuse, charges that carry potential prison time. The investigation had uncovered damning evidence. Traces of crushed sedatives in a coffee grinder at our old apartment, online purchases of prescription drugs from overseas pharmacies, and most disturbingly, a journal hidden in his desk drawer documenting his treatment plan for me. In clinical, detached language, he had recorded his methods for managing Rachel's condition, which medications he'd added to my food and drinks, how he'd manipulated situations to make me doubt myself, and his observations on my deteriorating mental state. It was a chronicle of calculated destruction, written with the cold precision of someone conducting an experiment. When Miranda had shown me the journal, I'd vomited in her office trash can. Seeing the deliberate nature of what he'd done to me, seeing how he'd viewed me not as a person but as a project, had shattered any lingering doubts about whether I had misinterpreted his actions. Now, as I prepared for court, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Fear of facing him again, anxiety about having to relive the darkest period of my life in front of strangers, but also a steely determination to see this through, to hold him accountable not just for myself, but for anyone else he might target in the future. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Outside whenever you're ready. You got this." I took one last look around my apartment, my safe space, decorated with my own choices, filled with books and art and color. A visible manifestation of my reclaimed autonomy. Then I grabbed my purse and headed out to face the day. The trial lasted 2 weeks. 2 weeks of exposure and vulnerability as my private nightmare was dissected in public. 2 weeks of David maintaining his concerned facade, though it slipped occasionally when evidence particularly damning to him was presented. 2 weeks of experts testifying about the effects of the drugs I'd been given, about the psychology of gaslighting, about the patterns of coercive control. I testified for 3 days, describing in excruciating detail how I had slowly come to doubt my own mind, how I'd surrendered my independence piece by piece, how I'd nearly lost myself entirely. David's attorney tried to paint me as unstable, delusional, vindictive. But the evidence was overwhelming. The journals, the pharmacy records, the testimony from friends and family about my transformation under his influence, and my recovery after escaping. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, I didn't feel the triumph I had expected. Instead, I felt something quieter but more profound, peace. The validation that what I had experienced was real. That I hadn't imagined or exaggerated it. That I hadn't been crazy after all. David was sentenced to 8 years in prison. As he was led away, he looked at me one last time. I saw it then. The mask falling completely, revealing the cold rage beneath. The glimpse lasted only seconds, but it confirmed what I had come to understand. The charming, caring man I thought I'd loved had never existed. He had been a carefully constructed illusion designed to hide the predator within. In the months that followed the trial, I focused on rebuilding my life. The design studio where I'd been working on contract offered me a permanent position. I began volunteering with a domestic violence support group, sharing my story with other survivors of psychological abuse. I started dating again, cautiously, with clear boundaries and a newfound appreciation for authentic connection. But something was still missing. I had reclaimed my life, but I hadn't fully reclaimed my voice. The story of what had happened to me, the full unvarnished truth, remained largely private, shared only with those closest to me and in the sterile context of courtrooms and support groups. That changed when a journalist reached out, asking to interview me for a feature on psychological abuse. At first, I hesitated. Did I want to expose myself further? To be forever linked to this trauma in the public eye? But then I thought about how isolated I had felt during those dark months with David. How I had had no framework to understand what was happening to me until Megan had named it, gaslighting. How many others might be trapped in similar situations, unable to identify the subtle manipulation destroying their sense of self. I agreed to the interview. It was published on a Sunday. My story laid bare under the headline, "The Invisible Prison, How I Survived Gaslighting and Reclaimed My Mind." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Emails, messages, comments from people who recognized their own relationships in my experience. Who, for the first time, had a name for what they were enduring. 3 months after the article, I was invited to speak at a conference on domestic abuse. Standing at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, survivors, advocates, law enforcement, medical professionals, I took a deep breath and began. 2 years ago, I used to double-check every light switch, every message, every word I said, because I honestly believed I was going insane. I lived in constant fear of my next episode, my next failure, my next proof that my mind was broken. What I didn't realize was that the only thing broken was the relationship I was in, a relationship built on lies, manipulation, and a systematic campaign to destroy my trust in myself. As I spoke, I watched recognition dawn in many eyes. Heads nodding, tears flowing, the silent acknowledgement of shared experience. Gaslighting thrives in silence and isolation, I continued. It feeds on doubt and shame. The most powerful weapon against it is truth, spoken, heard, validated. My healing began the moment I first heard the word, gaslighting, and recognized my experience in its definition. It continues every time I tell my story and see that recognition in someone else's eyes. Every time I help another person name what's happening to them. I paused, gathering my strength for the most important part of my message. If you are in the fog right now, if someone in your life makes you question your memory, your perception, your sanity, know this: you are not crazy. The confusion you feel is not evidence of your broken mind, but of a broken relationship. The constant self-doubt, the anxiety, the fear, these are normal responses to abnormal treatment. My voice grew stronger, fueled by the conviction of someone who had walked through fire and emerged scarred but whole. Trust yourself, even when it's hard, even when every instinct has been trained to defer to someone else's reality. That small voice inside that says, "This isn't right," listen to it. It's the part of you fighting to survive. Document everything. Keep a private journal. Send emails to yourself. Create an external record of your reality that can't be manipulated or denied. Reach out to a friend, a family member, a hotline, a support group. Break the isolation that gives gaslighting its power. You don't have to use the word abuse if you're not ready. Just say, "Something feels wrong, and I need someone to listen." And know that there is life after gaslighting. A rich, full life where you make your own choices, trust your own perceptions, and live in your own truth. I stand before you as proof of that possibility. I ended my speech to a standing ovation, but it wasn't the applause that moved me. It was the line of people who approached me afterward, many with tears in their eyes, saying, "You just described my life." It was the emails that continued to flood in for weeks, from people finding clarity in their confusion, strength in their vulnerability. That conference led to more speaking engagements, a support group I founded specifically for survivors of psychological abuse, and eventually a book. With each retelling, my story became less about what had been done to me and more about what I had done in response, how I had fought back, reclaimed my reality, rebuilt my life. 3 years after leaving David, I received a letter from a woman named Eliza. She had been dating David before he met me. She had experienced the same gradual erosion of self, the same manipulation of her reality. She had ended up hospitalized after a mental breakdown. Reading my story had been a revelation for her, the missing piece that finally made sense of what had happened. "You gave me back my sanity," she wrote. "For years, I believed I was broken. Now I understand that I was broken into." Her words crystallized something I had been feeling for some time. By speaking out, I wasn't just healing myself, I was creating the possibility of healing for others. The prison of gaslighting is built of silence and isolation. Every story shared is a brick removed from its walls. Today, 5 years after escaping David's web of manipulation, I lead a life I once thought impossible. I run my own design studio. I've written a book. I speak nationally about psychological abuse. I'm in a relationship based on mutual respect and authenticity. Most importantly, I trust myself, my perceptions, my memories, my instincts. The woman who once doubted her own reality now helps others reclaim theirs. The voice that was nearly silenced now speaks for those still struggling to find words for their experience. If you're reading this and recognizing your own relationship in my story, please hear me. Gaslighting is real. If someone makes you question your sanity, your memory, or your instincts, that's not love. That's abuse. You are not crazy. You are not alone. And you can find your way back to yourself. It won't be a straight path. There will be days when doubt creeps back in, when the old programming reasserts itself, when you question whether you've overreacted or misremembered. That's normal. Healing isn't linear. But with each step you take away from the fog, each time you honor your own perception, set a boundary, speak your truth, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Bit by bit, day by day, you rebuild the foundation of self-trust that gaslighting eroded. I am still rebuilding, still discovering parts of myself that were buried under years of doubt. Still learning to distinguish between healthy self-questioning and the destructive self-doubt that was instilled in me. It's ongoing work, but it's work worth doing. Because on the other side of gaslighting is something beautiful, the freedom to be fully yourself, to trust your own mind, to live in your own truth. The power of that freedom is immeasurable. Your story matters. Your reality is valid. Your mind is your own. Reclaim it. If this video helped you recognize the signs of gaslighting in your own life or someone you care about, please subscribe. Your support helps me reach others who might be trapped in the same invisible prison I escaped. One subscription could literally save someone's life. Turn on notifications so you never miss another story that could protect you or someone you love.